Imagine a world where time stood still, a land of silent samurai, wooden cities glowing under paper lanterns, and a society so rigid that your entire life was decided at birth. Now imagine that world just moments before it was shattered forever. This is Japan in the 1850s, the final breath of an ancient civilization before the modern world stormed in. In this era, Japan existed in what historians call the late Edo period, a time of remarkable peace and stability under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. Although an emperor still existed, real power lay in the hands of the shogun, a military ruler who governed the country through a strict and highly organized system. For over 250 years, Japan had intentionally isolated itself from the outside world, creating a unique society that developed without significant foreign influence. But beneath this calm and controlled surface, pressure was quietly building. At the heart of this world was Edo, known today as Tokyo, one of the largest cities on Earth at the time, with a population exceeding 1 million. The city was a maze of narrow streets lined with wooden houses, bustling marketplaces, and glowing lanterns that illuminated the night. Life in Edo was not chaotic but carefully structured. Society was divided into strict classes: samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. This hierarchy was not just social, it defined every aspect of life. What you wore, where you lived, how you spoke, and even your future were all determined by your class. Movement between classes was nearly impossible, ensuring that order remained intact. At the top of this hierarchy stood the samurai, once legendary warriors known for their mastery of the sword and unwavering code of honor. Yet by the 1850s, their role had dramatically changed. Japan had experienced over 2 centuries of peace, and as a result, the need for warriors had diminished. Many samurai had transitioned into bureaucrats, administrators, and scholars. They still carried their swords as symbols of status and identity, but their purpose was fading. Financial struggles became increasingly common among them, and a quiet sense of uncertainty began to grow. The warrior class, once the backbone of Japanese power, was slowly losing its place in a world that no longer required constant battle. Below them were the common people, who formed the backbone of society. Farmers made up the vast majority of the population, working tirelessly in rice fields to produce the food that sustained the nation. Their labor was heavily taxed, supporting the entire social structure above them. Artisans crafted goods such as tools, clothing, and household items, contributing to the economy through skilled craftsmanship. Merchants, despite being placed at the bottom of the social hierarchy, often accumulated significant wealth through trade and commerce. This created a strange contradiction. Those considered least honorable were sometimes the most financially powerful. In rural villages, life followed a predictable rhythm dictated by the seasons: planting, harvesting, and surviving. For most people, the outside world was distant and irrelevant, almost as if it didn't exist at all. This isolation was not accidental, but enforced through a national policy known as sakoku, or closed country. Under this system, Japan severely restricted foreign interaction. Trade was limited to a small number of controlled ports, most notably in Nagasaki, where only select foreign traders, primarily the Dutch, were allowed limited access. Christianity and other foreign influences were banned, and Japanese citizens were forbidden from leaving the country. For over 2 centuries, this policy maintained peace and stability, allowing Japan to develop a distinct culture untouched by global conflicts. However, while Japan remained still, the rest of the world was rapidly advancing through industrialization, technological innovation, and expanding global empires. Then, in 1853, everything changed. The arrival of American warships under the command of Matthew Perry marked a turning point in Japanese history. These steam-powered vessels, known as the Black Ships, were unlike anything the Japanese had ever seen. They represented a level of technological advancement that Japan could not match. Perry's mission was clear: force Japan to open its ports to trade with the United States. Faced with overwhelming military superiority, Japan had little choice but to comply. This moment shattered over 2 centuries of isolation and exposed a harsh reality: Japan was vulnerable. The arrival of the West created deep divisions within Japanese society. Some leaders believed that Japan should resist foreign influence and preserve its traditions at all costs. Others argued that the country must modernize quickly or risk colonization by Western powers. This internal conflict created political instability and weakened the authority of the shogunate. The samurai, already struggling with their changing role, found themselves caught in the middle of a rapidly shifting world. The old system that had maintained order for centuries was beginning to unravel. Within just a few years, this tension escalated into a national crisis that led to the Sukkut of the Tokugawa shogunate and the restoration of imperial power under Emperor Meiji, an event known as the Meiji Restoration. This transformation marked the end of feudal Japan and the beginning of a new era. The rigid class system was abolished and the privileges of the samurai were stripped away. Japan began an aggressive process of modernization, adopting Western technology, military practices, and industrial systems. What followed was one of the fastest national transformations in history. What makes the 1850s so fascinating is that it represents a moment suspended between two worlds. On one side was a deeply traditional society defined by honor, hierarchy, and isolation. On the other was the unstoppable force of modernity, driven by technology, global trade, and industrial power. Through AI reconstruction, we can now visualize this critical moment with unprecedented clarity. We can see the streets of Edo, the quiet dignity of the samurai, and the everyday lives of people who had no idea their world was about to change forever. It is not just a glimpse into the past, it is a snapshot of a civilization standing on the edge of transformation. Japan in the 1850s was more than just a historical setting. It was a turning point that would shape the future of the nation and influence the global balance of power. The traditions that had defined Japanese society for centuries would soon give way to modernization and innovation. The samurai would disappear as a ruling class, their swords replaced by modern weapons and new forms of authority. Cities would evolve, industries would rise, and Japan would emerge as a powerful and modern nation within just a few decades. All of this began during this brief but critical period. In the end, the story of Japan in the 1850s is not just about the fall of an old system. It is about the beginning of something entirely new. It is a reminder that even the most stable societies can change in an instant when confronted with external forces and internal pressures. It is a story of adaptation, resilience, and transformation. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that history is not just something we read about. It is something we can now see, reconstruct, and experience again. Through AI, the past is no longer lost. It is being brought back to life, allowing us to witness the final moments of worlds that once existed and to understand how they shaped the world we live in today. Thanks.